Okay, good afternoon, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. So today we shall continue with the book, The Count of Monte Cristo, chapter 5, 6, and 7. If any one of you guys, like I mentioned before I started recording, did not read chapter 7, that is my mistake because me, in my infinite wisdom, might probably have missed that out. Chapter 7 is very important because 5, 6, and 7 represents like a mini story arc on its own, and it doesn't really make sense if you don't read like 5, 6, and 7 as a set. If you read like 5 and 6, it kind of like a bit weird, and it doesn't really help like chapter 6 being very historically and politically based. I will fill in a bit of the details in terms of the history and the politics simply because it's kind of necessary to understand it a little bit better, but I won't go full on crazy details. Now, before we begin chapter 5, let's do a small recap. We learned from last week that Edmond has a problem because he has three idiots hanging around him. One being Caderousse, one being Danglars, which is the most treacherous and the most dangerous one, and one with Fernand, his jealous rival for Mercedes's affections. So we know, and we left off at chapter 4 also, that they have hatched a scheme, a plot to kind of tip Edmond off his rails a bit because, as Danglars has mentioned, his star is arising, quote unquote. So they are trying to find a way to kind of kick him off just slightly, just to see what happens. Now, does it work? What's the consequences? This is where we find out in chapter 5, chapter 6. Now, we begin chapter 5 with the wedding. The wedding is now, there's actually a lot of meaning to the wedding in both more surface level than metaphorical in terms of like underlying meanings. But basically, if any one of you guys have always wondered why people make such a huge fuss about weddings, uh if you ask somebody right now, they will give you a very, very different answer compared to people last time, or in this situation, in the context of this book, is 19th century France. One thing you guys must understand, okay, a slight sociology um, lesson is that weddings have always placed a very high, what's the word I'm looking for again? Priority, importance in a community, in a society in general. Because it is one of the few times where it is a time to celebrate the union of two peoples. And also remember, depending on your cultural background, it's not just the person, it's the entire family that comes together into a single unit. So it's a huge deal. Okay. And certain cultures see it much more strictly compared to others. And if to a certain point, you can even observe it in religions where certain religions take it, most religions, to be honest, are quite stringent about the rules and what you have to do when you're in a marriage. In the first opening of the book, probably in the first 5 or 6 pages, we see merriment. There's a lot of it. I didn't put all of it in, but I picked the most important one because I feel that this is the one that if any one of you have been to a wedding dinner, it kind of resonates with you because it's literally how it's like, which is that you have everybody in a single hall, right? You don't know half of the people there. I mean, heck, you'll be lucky if you even know half of them there. So what happens is that you just look around and say, I don't know who are you, I don't know who you are, you don't know who am I, but we are just here to celebrate for the bride and groom. Now, of course, if you're friends or or they are your relatives or whatsoever, then things change a bit. It gets more merry to the point that it gets out of control, and partially because alcohol is involved in weddings, and the alcohol is always a huge thing for weddings. And again, most people get drunk. In this first part of the book, that's exactly what's going on here. They are all very, very merry, basically. I'm just going to put it very simply first. There are parts that I wanted to talk about, but I felt that it's not quite it's not important, it's slightly off the topic of what we are on about, which is the story in general. So I'm just going to leave that be first, and I might just make a whole another video about it, but that's more sociological at that point. So we will have I'll see that. Now, what is important here is a mist of all these festivities, we know as the reader something is going to go wrong. Partially also because, as I mentioned, in the chapter before this, there were a lot of scheming on behalf of some very jealous people, and I just realized that I put chapter 3 instead of chapter 4. Oopsies. Just ignore that. Now, the first lesson you can kind of take from here, okay, is that you will never really know the people who are around you and what they're up to, right? So, in the book, partway through the chapter, Mercedes and Edmond both have this moment where they were like, oh, I'm reserving the seat next to me to the person who I hold most dear or who I hold most important to me. It's even the same even now, which is that the closer you sit towards the bride and the bridegroom, the more important or the closer in terms of familial attachments you have towards them. You'll notice that both Mercedes and Edmond has somebody with them next to them that are not really, really there for their happiness. For Mercedes's end, it is Fernand. For Edmond's end, it's Danglars. Fernand, honestly, is not the best poker player because his facial expression, as Dumas described it, was extremely colorful. We will have a look at him later on in the next few slides when we talk about. Now, our resident snake, Danglars, has quite a lot of games going on in this chapter. He was on quite the roll. Very interested to make sure that he is, as I mentioned before, he's interested in messing things up, but he doesn't want to get his hands dirty. In this chapter, again, you see how he so well manipulates the situations around him, how he interacts with people to kind of give off the air of, I have no idea what's going on, why is everyone looking at me? We will examine much closer that between him and Caderousse as well, which will also be later on. Now, besides the fact that Danglars sitting next to Edmond is the treacherous snake, and Edmond not knowing that he is actually out to get him, you also see Danglars doing Danglars things up with his old little tricks. So in the second bullet point, you can see Danglars, but Danglars put in timidly, what about the other formalities, the contract, the settlement? What he meant here was, because in the chapter, Dantes and Mercedes were about to get married. Now, getting married is not just like you walking to a church and then just say I do and that's it. There's a lot of formalities to it. You have to, even to this day, the what he's talking about here is the same here. You have to get yourself registered in a government office. You need to sign a document. You need to resolve a lot of things about your personal stuff. As you can tell, I don't really know what goes on there because I'm not married. You guys know who is married, go ask them, they will tell you. But basically, there are things you have to do. There's paperwork, there's red tape that you have to go through. So Danglars is kind of innocently asking, oh, you're getting married so soon? Surely there's more things to do. And Edmond was kind of, just telling, because Monsieur Morel helped me out. So again, we see Monsieur Morel playing the role of the patron to Edmond. He was very generous to Edmond. He did a lot of things to help him out. What he did basically is that he went to the government and basically did a lot of things for him and got past a lot of the hoops and the bureaucracy of it. Because again, Monsieur Morel is quite a respectable merchant and he's pretty well known in the town of Marseille. So he seems to be able to know people and kind of cut some corners here and there. Now, the third bullet point you see here is after Edmond was taken away by the police. I will talk a bit about the significance of the police coming by, taking Edmond away, so on and so forth later as well. I just want to make sure we get Danglars out of the way first. So, the treacherous snake did his first kind of tiny bit of manipulation towards Monsieur Morel. So we know he has kind of bent and twisted and puppeteered Caderousse, especially Fernand. We actually see him do this for Morel as well, for Monsieur Morel. So, the context of this line I'm going to read you is that Monsieur Morel asked if Danglars has told police anything about them stopping off in the island of stopping off in Porto Ferraio and then after that passing something on the island on the island Elba. So what he told Monsieur Morel is, I was careful not to do any such thing. Danglars assured him, lowering his voice. You know very well that on account of your uncle, Monsieur Policar Morel, who served under you know whom and makes no secret of his feelings, you are suspected of hankering after the old regime. I would have been afraid I might harm Dantes and also yourself. There are some things that a subordinate has a duty to tell the owner and to keep well hidden from anyone else. There's a lot of politicking going on in this line. Now, Policar Morel is actually referred to in chapter 1, which is Monsieur Morel's uncle. Okay? And you will recall that when he was kind of tearing up when Napoleon actually remembers who he is. Now, you know whom is not Voldemort, okay? This is not Harry Potter, but Napoleon Bonaparte. I will talk about him later when we talk about chapter 5. Yes, chapter 5. I'm getting confused with chapters myself. Chapter 5. So why is this so important, and how does this show manipulation? He's manipulating Morel very subtly by kind of threatening him without actually threatening him. Because you see, it is extremely dangerous to be associated with anyone who either sympathizes with Napoleon or is a outright Napoleon supporter. You can get into trouble, and to be honest, I'm kind of putting it mildly when I say get into trouble. So he's in a way kind of showing off how careful and how clever he is by not doing it. At the same time, also kind of subtly reminding Monsieur Morel that you might want to make sure that I didn't say anything because your uncle is a major. Is it major? I can't quite remember. He actually mentioned the rank of the uncle in the army. So it's best you don't say anything. Because again, even associating yourself or even being a family member of someone who supports Napoleon is a big no-no here. And of course, this is the time where we actually see Monsieur Morel fold his cards, and he just kind of goes like, "Oh yeah, you're right," which to be honest, we can kind of understand because it is a very dangerous time, and it does threaten him, honestly, quite directly. Now, again, I will talk about why is it such a threat later on further down because there's a political background to it that is relatively important, which we will get to in a bit. Now, the next slide. Is where we see him continue. Now, after he's done kind of making sure Monsieur Morel shuts the hell up and kind of does certain things and he's kind of not part of it, because you notice he is only interested if he's in the picture. The moment he's out of picture, he doesn't care. So because Monsieur Morel asked him, do you have anything to do with it? In a very indirect way, and he kind of cleverly pushed the responsibility away and said, no, I didn't do anything. Why would I do anything about it? Don't forget, if I say something, you get in trouble, Ed gets in trouble, and nobody wants that, do we? So one down, he has two problems left to go. Well, at least on his book as of right now. Caderousse and Fernand. Now, Fernand, honestly speaking, at this point doesn't really care because as we established last week, Fernand is just is like Danglars, honestly. He doesn't give a crap. He just wants what he wants, and that's it. What is the thing that he wants? He wants Edmond out of the way. So the biggest conflict we actually see here between Danglars and other characters is Monsieur Morel and Caderousse over here. Now, also another thing, after he has kind of lowered Monsieur Morel's guard by showing how insightful, how clever he is, how he's able to foresee possible problems if he actually approaches the police and the gendarme in French by telling them about Edmond's tiny excursion. He kind of also wants to now know about him because don't forget, he's not doing this just for giggles. He's doing this because he wants Edmond out of the way so he can get something. So what is it that he wants? He wants to know if he can have a position, a better one. You see, he actually even says this. We must hope, said Danglars. Then, since we cannot sail again for 3 months, Dantes will be freed before then. He's still trying to play the role of, oh, it's so sad Edmond is taken, but surely he will be back within 3 months. Again, you guys notice he loves doing this where he throws a sentence out there just to fish for information. And he got the information he wants. Because in this situation, Monsieur Morel asked him, of course, but in the meanwhile, translated over, not so then what until then, Well, Monsieur Morel, in the meantime, I'm here. How convenient. As you know, I can manage a ship as well as the first ocean-going captain who may come along. It may even benefit you to use me because when Edmond comes out of prison, you will not have to dismiss anybody. He will quite simply resume his post and I mine. You gotta give it to this guy. He is so clever that, almost likable, almost. What he did here basically is notice he did not openly show he did not like Edmond. He did not openly say that, haha, I'm the one who did this. He just kind of says that, oh, since Edmond is not here, I can take his place first. And when he is, by the way, notice one thing. He said, when Edmond comes out. He didn't say, if Edmond comes out. This is actually a word play of words. If you say if, it means you don't know. When is just when is as if he's unconsciously telling him, oh, he will come out. So when he comes out, he can still be captain, and I'll just be the supercargo. When we know that's just all kind of a huge cart of stinky manure, right? But oh well, we just don't. We as the reader know what's up. He is just playing Monsieur Morel around, and unfortunately, Monsieur Morel just kind of has to go with it because he realizes that there's really nothing he can do at this situation, especially after being reminded that his uncle served under Napoleon. Now, now, now that he's kind of done with making sure what he wants is secure, he just needs to make sure nobody comes along and pop his balloon and spoil his party. So, first thing, if it brings misfortune, it will be the guilty party, and the real responsibility lies with Fernand, not with us. He's talking to Caderousse here because Caderousse actually confronts him. He confronts him and says, hang on, was it you guys as responsible for this? I seem to recall that you guys did something yesterday. And he's like, me? Why would I do such a thing? And notice again, he pushes the responsibility away. See, it's not me. If there's someone guilty, it's Fernand. You know, he was the one who took the paper. I didn't want to take the paper. I crunched it and threw it aside. It's not me. Good God. Anyway, so then he then tells Caderousse, in a way, again, you notice Danglars never really tells, sort of, directly to the characters' faces what they should do. He just kind of hints it, he kind of say, oh, just do this, everything will be fine. And what does he suggest? All we have to do is to keep quiet and not breathe a word about this. And the storm will blow over without striking us. Translated, keep your mouth shut and then we won't die. For whatever reason, because what he's telling Caderousse is, if you shut up and don't say anything, whatever happens will never affect us because we don't know anything. So in that situation, who would be interested in people who don't know anything? So yeah, Caderousse strike off the list. So then we go to Fernand. We will go back to Danglars later because we have to go to Caderousse, our resident idiot. Most useless fan award of the century. But until then, let's resolve Fernand first. Now, frankly, I think Dumas wrote Fernand a bit dramatically here, but I can see what he's trying to say. Fernand, throughout the whole first part of the chapter, was just on edge. He was just like freaking out half of the time. You can see he's extremely anxious. It's as if he's expecting something. Something. We know what it is, okay? But nothing is happening. So he's just sitting around and he's on edge the whole time. You can see that actually what he's doing kind of unsettles him because when Mercedes says, remember when I said that Mercedes actually asked Fernand to sit next to her because she regards him as family. What was his reaction? He became pale. It is a very common reaction of being guilty. He's basically unconsciously feeling horrible about it, about what he has done. He's concerned that, and by the way, he's not feeling horrible about what he's doing to Edmond. He's feeling horrible, which is if my plan doesn't work, Mercedes might not, might do what she threatened to do, which is to kill herself and not want to live anymore. So he's constantly on edge at this point. This is basically how it feels like when you're going to go for a big exam or whatever big project and you have nothing to do but wait, and you are literally on edge half of the time. You start thinking about, oh my god, what's going to happen? Oh my god, is this going to happen? That's basically him. Just multiply that by 10 because, it involves the law. So you will see that throughout the chapter, all the way until Edmond gets arrested, he is described as being pale. He is described as he's just freaking out half of the time, simply because he's waiting for something to happen. Now, honestly, that's basically it for Fernand. What he did after this, when Edmond was taken away, is he appears like a knight in shining armor. He decides to he at that moment, the moment Edmond was taken away, he sat next to Mercedes and he inserts himself back into her life. What a nice guy. So we will come back to Fernand much later on, and we will see what this cowardly coward has done or will do later on in the story. Because unfortunately or fortunately, this is the last time we will hear about him for a while. Now, our resident bad friend, Caderousse. Remember when I mentioned last week that Caderousse had a lot of opportunities to redeem himself as a friend, but he kinda didn't? In this chapter, he actually has another opportunity here. He realizes that this is not an accident. He realizes that actually this is part of a scheme, a plot, and it is very likely it's Fernand and Danglars' plot and scheme. Now, before we get to the part where he actually confronts and tries to do something, you can actually see Caderousse's true feelings for Edmond, or what Edmond is going through before the police shows up again. Now, I mentioned last week, which is that Caderousse is a bit of a useless person in Danglars' eyes because Danglars knows that Caderousse is jealous. Caderousse is jealous that Edmond has all the things that he wants, but he doesn't have. But the difference between him and Fernand is he doesn't act it out. He tries to brush it off and say, oh, it's okay. I don't want anything. I'm okay. You see here in the first bullet point, I must say, Caderousse remarked, the last remnants of the hatred which Dante's unexpected good fortune has sowed in his mind, having succumbed to Dante's joviality and above all, to Pierre Pampil's excellent wine. Again, he's drunk. It's not only he's drunk and his real feelings towards Edmond now really fully manifest and shows in his face and shows in his action, which is jealousy. He tried very, very hard to hide it in the previous chapters, and now it's just straight up in front of the face of Fernand and Danglars. The problem is, when the police shows up, he kind of snaps out of it, and he wakes up and he tries to do something about it. This is the one other time. Is this the second time? Yeah, this is the second chance Caderousse kind of has to try to do something for his friend. I mean, let's be honest, at this point, it's like friend, quotation mark, not like friend, full stop. So, Caderousse starts off by saying, it is you. He walks up to Danglars and confronts Danglars. I love this line, which is actually mentioned. I took this line, which I'm going to read for you guys, which is a bridge line, meaning they change the words. But the original version sounds much, much better because the original word actually uses the word arrow. Now, Danglars, okay? If one were to held account for every remark one lets fall. And Caderousse replied, yes, when it falls, point downwards. Now, what's the context of this sentence here? Caderousse is basically saying, it's because of you. You are the one who gave the idea to Fernand. But, let's just forget about the fact that this genius was the one who gave them the idea in the first place. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. You are the one who gave Fernand the idea. And here's where you see Danglars trying to be slippery, Oh, but come on, you can't possibly hold me accountable for everything and anything I say. And he basically says, honestly speaking, this is the smartest line and wisest line he's ever going to say in the whole book, which is, you are to be held accountable for it if whatever you say actually impacts someone. The word actually being used in the unabridged version, which I think they translated originally from French straight away to English, is, if I were to shoot, one should not be accountable for every arrow shot into the air. That's when Danglars' line is in the original unabridged version. And Caderousse says yes, because when the arrow points downwards. Because the logic is correct. You can't just randomly fire into the air because it will come back down, it will land somewhere. And again, it's kind of rich for Caderousse to say this because he's the genius that literally was babbling the whole way through in chapter 1 and 2 and giving them all the chapter 2 and 3 and giving them all the ideas about what is going on with Edmond. And the worst part is he wasn't even putting Edmond in a good light. So because he's trying to redeem himself, let's just close one eye and pretend nothing happens for now, and let's just hope that he does something. Spoiler, he doesn't do anything. Now, Dangla realizes that, okay, this fool is not as big of a fool. He changes his strategy, changes it slightly. Then he says, are you sure you want to be that defensive with Edmond? You know he is being charged for treason. Because here's the thing, up until about his arrest, we don't, okay, not we know. The characters in the story don't really know what Edmond is being arrested for, until Monsieur Morel finds out and reports back that he's a spy, or basically he's a Napoleon agent of Napoleon. This is extremely dangerous. It is basically like saying that you're a spy for a country that I can't give you an example of a country because I don't want to be killed. So just give you an idea. Just fill in the blank of yourself. It's as good as if you are a spy for a certain country in the world and nobody really likes that country. Yeah, fill in the blanks, and everybody starts looking at you like, oh my god, you're that kind of person. So the problem right now is that defending Edmond becomes very dangerous, literally and figuratively, because again, anyone who's associated with Napoleon is not treated very gently by the government. So what does he do? He's smart. He just takes that and turns it around. Are you sure you want to defend him? You do know that if they actually, because at this point Danglars still pretends that he doesn't know anything. You know, even though we don't know if Edmond is a spy or an agent, what if he is? If he is, they will be looking for the people who are his accomplice. And who could possibly be a better accomplice than the people who are so fervently trying to defend him? Translated into simple English, if you keep defending this guy, you are gonna die because they will think that you're part of his little spy ring. And very quickly, Cadorus just goes like, "Oh yeah, yep. No, I do not want to have anything to do with that. Ergo, coward." Well done, Cadorus. Well done. So you see how things are turning out. This line is spoken after it was almost certain that there's nothing that can be done for Edmond. Now, this line is actually very important as well because we later on find out that Edmond the deck is stacked against Edmond because the person who's going to prosecute him or the person who's going to review his case is a very fierce royalist. Now, I'll explain what a royalist is after we finish talking about our good friend over here, which is in chapter 5. So basically, he realizes Edmond is in a lot of problems. Okay, almost impossible odds. So he kind of adds on a bit of spice. You see? Do you see how difficult the situation is? Are you sure you still want to stand up for Edmond? And as you can see, no, indeed not. But it's a dreadful that a trick would have such dire consequences. This guy, I swear to God, just reading his lines makes me depressed. So again, Cadorus just kind of backs off. He really does not want to take the risk because if he's given a choice to have to protect his life compared to standing up for his friend, he picks his life 10 out of 10 times, which at this point is not even an exaggeration. So Dangla basically has covered his butt in multiple ways, in more ways than one as well. And you will see this in this line here, which is the last bullet point, which I'll talk about that in a bit. Now, I titled the slide here "The Beginning of Despair" because the chapter is actually quite cruel because it starts kind of happy and beautiful because of the wedding. The moment the police comes in, everything changes. Now, you guys must understand something. Because you guys are such good boys and good girls, and I don't even mean that sarcastically, but good boys, good girls, and women, you have never had a police come up to your house before, and you need to understand that depending on where you're from, a police showing up in front of your house can either be something that you go like, oh, okay, it's fine, or oh my god, I'm gonna die. In this situation, as you can see, based on the way the crowd reacts and the way Edmond's father reacts, you know it's not good. The problem is we don't know what it is until Monsieur Morel comes back with the news, which as I've mentioned just now, Monsieur Morel went out of his way to go find out exactly what happened. Because don't forget, when the gendarme came by and arrested him, he says that I have no idea what your crime is. I only know I'm here to arrest you. And when they found out about his crime, things get very difficult. Again, because being an agent of Bonaparte. And yeah, everything goes very, very badly from that point on. Now, before we move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 5, I want to talk about the line that Danglars mentions in the end of the chapter, which is that he will be in the hand of justice. This line is kind of literal and metaphorical at the same time for two reasons. One, the literal meaning here is because he will be sent to court, right? He needs to be tried in court, which is it's justice, right? There's actually another meaning to it. There's a more meta meaning to it, which is the more metaphorical meaning. He will be in the hand of justice. Now, I'm not sure if any one of you are familiar with this, but there's a saying which is justice is blind for very good reason. Okay, and we will see that in chapter 5 and 6. So, he will be in the hand of justice. One, literally being he's in the court and he will be in the hands of whoever that's prosecuting him. The metaphorical meaning is he will be judged by somebody who doesn't really know what is going on other than the evidence that's presented to him. So the significance of this line is even more weight later on when we are introduced to Monsieur de Villefort, which we will come back to this line after we talk about him. And coincidentally, that's where we are going to go. Chapter 5. Monsieur de Villefort. Again, mind the mistake. Well done. I guess I really can't do math. Now, a quick rundown of chapter 5. If you guys read chapter 5 and you go, I have no freaking clue what the hell is going on, it's understandable. So, I shall do this. One. Here, chapter 5. Now, I won't read the whole chapter 5, but I'll just kind of go a quick rundown through. Do try to. I'm sorry if it's very difficult to follow because I do need to fill in the blanks using this before we actually continue on the story. I'll probably take about 20 minutes to do this. Might as well learn some history while you guys are at it. Now, don't remember one thing. It's the year 1815. This is when Napoleon got kicked out from France. He's no longer emperor of France. And he's only been kicked out from the country for a relatively short period of time. Therefore, that's the reason why everybody in the country is still freaked out. Like they're still on high alert. The tension is still high. Again, because they just got rid of this guy. And they didn't even throw him to the other side of the world. They literally put him up on an island near the coast of France. It's like France's backyard. It's like you are. Let me put it this way. It's like you are trying to cage a wild dog that is insane and rabid at your backyard. He's not in the house anymore, great, but he's still in your backyard. So the whole country is kind of freaking out about him coming back and taking over the country again and being emperor again. Most importantly, the elite are not happy with him coming back. They don't want him to come back. Now, when I say the elite, I mean the aristocrats of the time. Now, not saying there's none right now, but back then, especially in almost any society, but highly more specifically in monarchical societies, you have aristocrats who have titles, they have lands. Therefore, that's why you have people like, for example, in this situation, the Marquis de Samaron. A marquis is a title. It means that you have lands that is given to you by the king. And by the way, it more or less means that you know the king on a somewhat I know the king basis, which is a big deal, okay? Especially in a country where the king's word is law. They are not happy and they are extremely thrilled that Napoleon is no longer in France and he's away for good. And the beginning few pages is basically politics. It's about the French history for the past 16 years. Because, again, okay, here's a quick French Revolution background. In 1789, the French decided to overthrow their king because they feel that their king and their queen is kind of useless and they feel that they are very underrepresented, they are oppressed and they want equality and liberty. They overthrew their king. Things got off hand very quickly. They started killing a lot of people. They started changing a lot of things until Napoleon came along to bring stability back to the country. The problem is when he brought stability, he also crowned himself emperor. So, the French basically traded a king for a messy republic, and then a emperor, and now back to a king again. So, for the past about 16 years, France have not has not been having the funnest of times. Let's just put it that way. So the aristocrats of France in this chapter are very thrilled that their king is back. They sing praises about the king, right? Now, here is when we are introduced to our dear friend, Monsieur de Villefort. Who is Villefort? He, okay, is we know from this, he's the assistant to the chief magistrate of Marseille, meaning he's in charge of the courts in Marseille when the chief judge is not there. Now, before we talk about his character and whatsoever, which is described in the chapter, which is chapter 5, we need to understand why is this chapter so important. This chapter is important because it, one, shows you that Villefort is getting married to an aristocrat, which is the Marquis de Saint-Méran. Let me put it this way. It's kind of like you, almost, okay, almost. It's kind of like any one of you marrying either a prince or princess. It's just slightly lower, kind of slightly lower. Might not be king or queen, but it's a heck ton of money and a heck ton of influence. You basically overnight become like, I don't have to do anything anymore in my life to a certain degree. Okay. Now, this chapter is very important because it introduces us to Villefort's character in a very interesting way, mainly through his conversations with him and his in-law, specifically his father-in-law. Or is it his mother-in-law? Sorry, his mother-in-law. Sorry, I got it upside down with his mother-in-law. Now, his mother-in-law was quite hard on him. The reason why is because Villefort's father is not a royalist. Now, a royalist, as I mentioned just now, and I need to give a definition, is somebody who supports the king. It's a universal term. Anywhere you go in the world and if you hear someone say he's a royalist, it means that they support a system of monarchy, a king or a queen. Villefort is a very, very staunch royalist. And we actually know this even before chapter 5, because in chapter 4, as I mentioned, Edmond's deck is stacked against him because they realize that the guy who will be prosecuting him, reviewing his chapter, is this guy, which is a very staunch royalist. And to add salt to the wound or to add spice to the soup, depending on how you look at the situation, Edmond is supposedly being accused of being a spy or an agent to the enemy of the king, which by default makes him an enemy of Villefort. So you can kind of see that things are not going too well for Edmond already. Let me put it in perspective. In perspective for you guys, it's like you meeting someone new, but you know that this person is a very good friend to another person you know, and the other person is a straight up a-hole. And because of that, you kind of go like, if you're friends with that guy, how can I be sure that you're not like him? Ergo, your first impression is already kind of ruined. This is the concern that Monsieur Morel and Dantes' dad has, which is that if he goes to trial and if it's true, Edmond will die. And by the way, we know for a fact Edmond will die because in this chapter 5 right here, Villefort basically says, if there's any traitors, I will prove that I am a loyal servant to the king by cutting the head off. And to be really honest, he got kind of triggered by it because his mother-in-law was like, oh, are you sure you can do your job, Villefort? I know you're a very keen supporter of the king, but your dad was a gendarme. His father's actually a marshal, a very influential. Actually, not a marshal. Sorry, he's a military man. I can't quite remember the rank, but he's quite high up in Napoleon's army, and he's a very staunch Bonapartist, supporter of Napoleon. So the mother-in-law is basically going like, yeah, I know, you are a very loyal person now, but it's kind of hard to understand because your father is a Napoleon supporter, and that triggered Villefort like nobody's business. You can see over here. Do you realize that there's a strong whiff of revolution in you that you're saying, Villefort? Now, the revolution he's talking about is basically Villefort's arguments that I will not go into detail because this is not politics, but basically Villefort has a very different point of view from his mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law is like, oh my goodness, that's a very, very strong view of the situation. But then again, you are a son of father. Sure, it is understandable that you have that view, and you see Villefort's face flush a deep red. By the way, he's not embarrassed, he's pissed off. Okay, so Villefort does a lot of things here in this chapter, and the chapter shows us a lot of things about Villefort. Now, going back to the PowerPoint, I will show you what are the things, which is okay. First things first, Villefort is extremely ambitious. By the way, he's 24. He's 24 years old, and he's a deputy in a court, meaning he has the power of life and death in certain situations. He's very wealthy, not only because of his position, because he has married into wealth, which is his in-laws family. In-laws family is rich, has money, right? The issue he has is that he faces problems. One, he's always in his father's shadow, which is de Villefort. And you see it in the book as well, where he says that you notice that he told it to his in-law. He told straight to his mother-in-law's face. You notice I don't identify myself with my father. Not here. I identify myself as de Villefort. Now, honestly speaking, I don't really know what difference does it make, because as far as I can tell and as far as I can find, de Villefort is a family name. So it means that you guys are the same anyway. But from what I can gather, what he's trying to say is, I'm trying my best to distance myself from my father because that guy is not going to help me further my interests. He is not going to help me attain a very high rank in society. He's not going to make sure that I succeed, because again, it kind of doesn't help that your father supports your political enemy of the king that you supposedly serve right now. It becomes very difficult for people to believe you, or for people to even go like, are you sure you're the king supporter? You do know that your dad supports the bad guy, quotation mark. Besides that, he has a problem, which is that he married a marquis, not royalty, sorry, an aristocrat who whose rank and title and their influence comes straight from the king. They need the king to be in the throne and rule so that they have influence. Because the moment the king gets kicked out again, they immediately lose everything. Because you only get the title, you only get the influence because the king gives it to you. Though the moment the king's like kaput, everything goes bye bye. Hence, again, as I mentioned just now, why chapter 5 is relatively important, because you understand the motivations of the aristocratic class. They have no intention of wanting Napoleon back, because if Napoleon comes back and the king gets kicked out of the country again, they basically lose everything. They lose their influence, they lose their money, they lose their land, everything. They have to run to some other god-forsaken country. Well, supposedly god-forsaken country. Honestly, they just run to England or run to Germany. But still, they have no influence if they do that, right? Now, he has his pressure, which is his future in-law, specifically the mother-in-law, because the mother-in-law has no intention of having her son-in-law being a sympathizer for the enemy. Hence why in chapter 5, they spend so much time just arguing and talking about, would you do the right thing? Oh, if a traitor comes back, will you kill him? Will you execute him? Will you do the right thing? And of course, Villefort says, what kind of question is that? Of course, if it's the law, if the evidence is true, I will. Now, to add on more weight to the problems that he potentially will have, he is beginning to gain quite a bit of influence in high society as well. Because one, when you marry into high society, everybody knows you and everybody starts to want to know you. And the problem is, he cannot maintain his position and his standing and his reputation among them unless he acts in a way that is favorable, which in this situation, we will know it's not kind of hard. Punish the Bonapartists. The third thing, which is the most important thing in chapter 5, which shows us, is that he actually has the king's confidence. Now, what does it mean to have the king's confidence? It means that the king actually knows who he is. So, to kind of put that into perspective, imagine if the king knows your name and they go like, oh yeah, I know that person. Yeah, they're a pretty good person. Yeah, they know exactly what they're doing. They're doing a very good job. They start praising you and you start going like, oh my god. Half of you go like, I am being acknowledged. The other half of you goes like, crap, I cannot make a mistake. Because the king has, spouted praises. If you do something stupid and you embarrass him for saying that, you will very, 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 very quickly see your face in the mud because you basically embarrass him. Because, he said something good about you and you do something stupid to kind of make him look like he's an idiot or that whatever he's saying is just nonsense. You basically shame him. Nobody, especially a king, wants to be embarrassed by the fact that they put their trust in the wrong person. So he does have a lot of weight on his shoulders. To top it all off, he recently married Renee de Samaron, which is the wife, and that's why his in-laws are the Marquis de Samaron. So we can see Villefort is quite an influential figure. He has power, he has wealth, but it does not come free. He has problems on his own. He needs to maintain this power and this wealth and this influence by, doing what he's supposed to be able to do, doing what he has to do. Now, sounds simple enough until you think about, oh yeah, it's Edmond, and oh yeah, he's being accused of being a Bonapartist. So you can kind of see that things don't stack up his way. Now, here's the thing: we don't really know. Well, we kind of know that Edmond is going to go to jail because if he doesn't go to jail, there's no story. The question is why. That is where go. Yeah. Chapter 6. And again, I apologize for the title because I can't do math. It's chapter 6. Now, chapter 6, Justice and the Sailor. Chapter 6 is where for Edmond it is extremely important, and for us it's extremely important because this is the chapter that we really find out the fate of Edmond. Now, as I mentioned very earlier on, if you guys have not read chapter 6, it's fine. I will actually give you a summary of the chapter because again, my lack of foresight has made it so that I didn't tell you need to read chapter 6. Now, chapter 6 opens with Villefort leaving the party he was in. By the way, one tiny thing before we move on to chapter 6, I kind of forgot about it. Villefort was attending his marriage dinner as well during this time. So he and Edmond actually are almost on the same situation, which is Edmond got taken away to be tried as a criminal during his wedding. Not wedding, actually his engagement feast. Villefort was taken away during his engagement feast. So he's kind of ticked off about it. But he's kind of happy about it as well because he can also show off. He said, my profession is so noble, no time is free. My time is given to the state. Chapter 6 begins with Villefort leaving the Samaron estate, and he has to make his way to the office. He understands and he knows that the criminal that he's about to try is supposedly Bonaparte's agent. But that's it. He doesn't know. So he starts asking questions. And here's actually where we see Villefort showing he actually knows what he's doing. He's not a judge because his daddy is someone. He actually is a judge because he kind of knows what he's doing. The situation here is relatively straightforward. One, we yes, this chapter this is the important chapter. Yes, it's the in the interrogation. Yeah, correct. Hang on, let me just check the chapter name. Give me a moment. I have the book here. It is the interrogation, correct. So that's basically chapter we're talking about right now. And if I mess up the chapter again? Hang on, let me see. Nah. Oh yeah, it's chapter 7. Well done, George. You can't do math. Chapter 7, my bad. Thanks for pointing it out. Well done. Anyway, chapter 7. Oh Lord. Forget it. I'm not going to do this recording again anyway. Alright, so the interrogation basically again is between him and Edmond. Now, back to what I was saying, which is that's all he knows. He only knows that he's going to prosecute somebody who's supposedly a Napoleon agent. So okay, fine. Now he asks questions, tries to ascertain if it's true. He asks, "How old is this person?" 19. The gendarme who is like giving him the information, briefing him, tells him 19. Has he served in the army before? No. Has he served in the Marines before? No. And at this point, Villefort just kind of go like, that's a bit young to be a spy. But then he goes like, maybe that's how far the influence of the Napoleonic agents have gone. They tutored young people. Now, there's something very interesting over here, which is that the chapter then leads to when he enters the court and he asks Edmond to be brought into the courthouse, or sorry, to the court, to the hall, so that he can have a conversation with him and to interrogate him to see if he's really a spy. The interesting thing here is that Villefort's first impression of Edmond was actually very good. The chapter describes his impression of him as, Villefort's impression of Edmond as a very intelligent young man, very honest, very simple, very plain. And Villefort says to himself, "This does not look like somebody who is a spy. I don't know why, but oh well, I've been in situations where people look innocent, but they're actually guilty. So let's just go ahead." Again, showing his experience, he does not let his other somewhat subjective interpretations cloud his judgment to a certain point. So he then proceeds with the procedure as Edmond, right? Okay, so you how did you get this letter? How old are you? Did you ever join the army? And Edmond actually tells him very bluntly, I was supposed to join the army, but then Napoleon got deposed, so at that point I was not needed anymore. Hence why he became a sailor. Um, he then asked him, how did you get the letter? How did you get all this information? Blah blah blah. And Edmond tells him the story from beginning to the end. And as Edmond was telling the story, the chapter also, the book again explains that Villefort was looking very closely at Edmond as he's telling the story, and he can see that there's no lie when he's telling the story, when he's telling him what has happened. He can see that he's being very honest. He can see that he's not hiding anything. So at that point, he does not understand why is this guy in front of him. So he even said, it's fine. It's probably some impertinence that got you arrested, quote unquote, in the book. Now, at this point, everything seems very good for Edmond. He doesn't seem to be in trouble. It seems that the assistant procureur, which is Villefort, believes him and thinks that he's innocent. So Villefort kind of goes like, okay, you know what, you're innocent, just go shoot. But before Edmond manages to leave, Villefort realizes he forgets a question and asks him. He asks him, hold up, do you happen to know who you're supposed to deliver this letter to? One replies, Monsieur Notier in Paris. This is when everything changes because let me read the line to you because it's such a profound line in the book. When Villefort found out about who is going to receive the letter, okay. Oh, sorry, not the letter. I'm getting confused between the book and a movie. Whoops. The bundle. That's a bundle that he has to deliver. So when he says, so he asked him, who are you supposed to deliver it to? Edmond asked, to Monsieur Notier, Rue. I'm not going to try reading that in French. In Paris, basically. And at that moment, quote, if a bolt of lightning had struck Villefort, it could not have done so with greater suddenness or surprise. He fell back into the chair from which he had half risen to reach over to the bundle of papers that had been taken from Dantes, and hastily going through them, drew out the fatal letter, on which he cast a look of unspeakable horror. Any one of you have been paying attention to the name, you will know that letter is addressed to Villefort's father. It's a problem. It's a problem because now everything Villefort has is at stake. His wealth, his position, his marriage to Rene de Saint-Méran, his connection to the king, everything will go up into smoke if somebody ever finds out that his dear old dad is up to his no good business talking to the former emperor, which is Napoleon Bonaparte. It will be bad. To put it very mildly, it will be very bad. So in this situation, he has a problem right now. He has to actually do something about it because he can't just leave it be because and here's the thing. He cannot do anything about it. He cannot leave it be because he actually says it to himself later on when he actually sends Edmond to jail to send him away so that the secret will never be revealed. He actually thanked God that the chief prosecutor was not here, because if it was not him but the chief prosecutor here who is presiding the case, his life is over. His entire career, his everything is over, because the chief prosecutor will immediately notice that it's his father. He will be arrested on charges of being a possible accomplice. His father will be arrested, and everything goes bye bye for him. So he thanked God that he was so fortunate that the chief prosecutor wasn't in town to take this job. So why is it such a big deal? Well, again, like I mentioned, he will lose everything. So now he has a problem. I need to get rid of evidence. Two pieces of evidence are present. One, the letter. Two, unfortunately, is Edmond. So how does he handle the letter? He burns it. He but before he burns it, he does the thing which Dangla does, which is the manipulation tactic, by trying to find out as much from Edmond as possible. Have you opened this letter? Have you read this? And Edmond's like, no, I don't. I didn't open the letter at all. So he did all he could to make 100% sure Edmond does not know anything else other than the fact that he has to deliver this letter to his dear old dad. So step one's complete. Now what does he have to do? He deletes. He burns the letter in front of Edmond and says that this evidence is very dangerous for you. This line is pretty much mirrored in the movie. For those of you who have watched the movie before, and he burned the letter and said that this evidence is safer this way. Well, he kind of didn't say safer for whom. See, that's the thing. Fortunately, Edmond couldn't see it. He burns the letter, and that leaves only one person left. Oh, sorry, one item left, Edmond. How does he do? Now, he quickly backtracks on the idea of Edmond being able to leave. That he told Edmond, I actually need to hold you into the cell in the cell for a bit, because this changes things a bit. But you will be free later on in the morning. And Edmond, being Edmond, goes like, okay, thank you, you are good. Good, okay? You are not just justice, but your goodness itself. Oh my god, Edmond. Oh well. Unfortunately, Edmond kind of believes him, which we don't really blame him for, and he gets sent to jail. And let's just say Edmond spends a long time in jail. And hence the reason why he decided to do what he will do later on in the story. That is basically chapter 7. Now, chapter 7 is not just about resolving the question, which is, oh, what will happen to Edmond? There's actually a bigger thing over here. It actually very interestingly shows you contrast, Edmond and Villefort. Now, as I mentioned before in my chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 4 breakdown of the fool, the coward, and the snake, is that every one of the characters seem to have like embody a darker side of human nature, and they are out there to get Edmond because Edmond seems to have everything, right? Fernand represents jealousy in your personal relationships. Dangla represents jealousy in your career, but he also has that really malicious in general. I just want people to suffer so that I can gain kind of thing. Hence why I call him a bit of a psychopath. And then you have Caderousse, who is just like the worst because he's a coward, he's jealous, but he doesn't do anything about it. He just kind of lets things go. Where does Villefort fit here? Now, Villefort is in a very interesting position because he is so much superior to Edmond in many, many ways, right? He's richer, he's more powerful, he has more influence, he has everything. But then what does he represent? Now, what Villefort represents here is ambition. But not in a good way. He represents boundless and endless ambition to the point that he's willing to do whatever it takes to ensure that his ambition is seen. In this situation, what he did was that he's willing to sacrifice an innocent man's life, which is Edmond, just so that the secret will stay with him. Or, the secret does not get out. And his career will be safe, his life in as a whole will be safe. So he's given at the moment when he found out about the package being supposedly to be sent to his father, he had a choice. He either be the blind law and justice and do what is right, or He does what is in his best interest. Hence, why I say the significance of this line. He will be in the hand of justice. Well, not much justice there, considering the justice is biased. Hence, and again, going back to what I mentioned just now, justice is blind. It is blind because it is operated and it is executed by human beings, and humans are always flawed one way or another. There is no perfect judge. We will always be biased one way or another. Villefort's example of bias is quite dramatic, but it's quite similar as well because he has a personal interest in the situation, and this is why in when you guys get to a higher get to college or even university, you will hear this phrase tossed around a lot, which is conflict of interest. He has no business reciting this court case because his father is involved. This is why in situations like this, you are not allowed to participate in any of these things because you cannot think objectively. And as you can see, the moment he found out that his dad is involved, he immediately went into, instead of I will do what's right, I need to do what is right for me, which completely defeats the purpose of him being a judge. Now, besides that, we also see a very interesting difference between Edmond and Villefort. In terms of age, they're not that different. Villefort is only 5 years older than Edmond. Edmond's 19, Villefort is 24. They're not that much far apart. But in terms of their character, a bit simple, but I will expand on this later on. You will see that Villefort, compared to Edmond, right? Villefort is more sophisticated. He seems to be able to understand things, quote unquote, more. He's more experienced, evidently, because he's a judge. He's more ambitious. He wants more things. Edmond does not want anything. As a matter of fact, in the chapter, right, Edmond just kind of goes like, I don't know, I'm just a sailor, I only have three things: the love, my love for Mercedes, my respect for Monsieur Morel, and my affection for my father. It's very simple. Villefort even kind of tells him you should not do things that way. And he actually mentioned this to him because when Villefort asks Edmond, do you have any enemies? And Edmond says, no, I don't think so. Villefort is like, I'm pretty sure you do because look at your situation right now. You will have people who's jealous. Now, this is where it kind of bleeds into real life. This is why it is important for us to be realistic in a certain point. Now, when I say the word realistic here, I don't mean that you're realistic in that you're very materialistic realistic. No. It means that you must understand and accept that the people around you are, at the end of the day, people. They are human beings. They are flawed. They have their own agenda and they have their own emotions. They will feel negative or harbor negative feelings towards you. That's the reason why you have to be cautious. That's the reason why you cannot do what Caderus does by spouting nonsense every day, all day, every day, because you are basically giving people information that they can use against you. This is something that is the reason why most of the times you probably hear parents tell you this, or if not, I guess I'll tell you this: be careful of what you say, because you never know if whatever you're saying, especially to the person who you were talking to, is your friend or your friend, quotation mark. You will never know. It's a problem. And unfortunately, that's Edmond's flaw. As the main protagonist, he is too naive and blind to the fact that people can wish harm on him. He's too foolish is not the right word. He's just straight up either he's unwilling to or he knows but he didn't think much about it, because come on, we know that he knows that Danglars does not like him and he does not like Danglars, but he didn't think about anything else. He didn't consider that Danglars will actually take it personally, and I took it personally and tried to do something about it. He also did not see that Fernand's jealousy would cause him to do something like this, and he did not see that Caderus being a friend, quotation mark, will be a problem. Now, to be honest, this is why I say Caderus is such a tragically tragic character, because if you think about it, right, if you have friends like these three around you, you can kind of know how to distance yourself from Fernand and Danglars. How are you going to distance yourself from Caderus? he is relatively harmless most of the time. He's a big mouth. He's kind of loud. He's kind of random and very what's the word I'm looking for? Very, very dramatic is not the right word, but that's the word I'm thinking of right now. But he does not seem to be evil, right? He does not seem to be the kind of person that is all out to get you. But if we have learned something is it is those people, these people, that are actually the most dangerous ones. Not because they will not do anything to you, it's because they will not stand up for you. They will not be willing to do what is right. They will just kind of go like, and they are willing to do what is good for them. Not outwardly like Dangla or Fernan. That's still enough to be bad. Because again, going back to the point, they're not going to stand up for you. Dangla and Fernan are at least very transparently bad because you know they're out to get you. At the very least, you know they're out to get you. But having a friend like Kadarus makes it difficult because you don't know if you can trust them. And the worst part is your feelings just kind of go like, he's so harmless. How can I not trust him? That's the problem. He is harmless. You cannot trust him because you don't know what they are going to do. So, in a way, Edmond learns, quote unquote, learns his lesson the hard way. And I'm going to be very honest, he never really learned the lesson until later on in the chapters where he actually receives an education and he's actually shown in a way what the world is really like. And that's why I say that the chapters preceding this actually are very, very important as well, because that's when he meets his teacher, in a sense. Spoiler alert. So the comparison between Villefort and Edmond shows you something, which is that you cannot afford to be naive. You can that now this does not mean that you cannot be good, but there's a difference between being good and being naive. Being good means knowing what is good and bad and choosing to do good anyway. In this situation, it would be if Villefort knows that crap, I'm screwed. But you know what? Whatever. I'm just gonna tell my dad out, sell him out, and then hopefully, I am within the king's good graces. He could have opted that option, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to protect himself. He is a bad person because when was given a chance to be good, well, honestly, he was given a choice to either be good or be bad. And he chose to be bad because it's very convenient and it's very safe. And that's the second lesson we learn from Villefort. Not only that people become selfish and they will almost always put their interest before yours, is that it is always easy to be good when you don't have your neck on the line. Easy to be good because you don't have you're not influenced by it. If something goes wrong, you're not part of it. You don't have skin in the game. But the moment you have skin in the game, that's when you really determine if you're good or not. That's the second lesson we learned from Villefort. Now, does Edmond's situation teach us anything? I find Edmond's character to be very difficult to draw lessons from until later on in the chapter, simply because, right, if I say don't do what Edmond's doing, it can be very contradictory because we know he's a good man. We know that he's innocent. We know he's a simple man who just wants a simple life. Is that a problem? Is that a fault? No, it's not. But being ignorant is the problem. He's not ignorant on purpose, I would say, but he's definitely ignorant to a certain point. Now, arguably, you can actually say that being ignorant purposely is the worst because you purposely don't see things when you need to see them. You purposely ignore the time when your friend says something or your friend tells you a secret about someone that somebody tells you, and you don't go like, okay, I can't trust this person because they tell me a secret. You instead go like, oh yes, tell me more. Things like this. That's what Edmond shows us. It shows us that you can want what you want, you can live the life as you live, but you have to be alert. You be aware of potential enemies, not enemies in general. Don't be a crazy person and go like everybody's out to get me, but be alert, be aware. Understand that when you're in certain positions or when you gain certain things, there will be people out there who will not like you just pure out of jealousy. Now, is it as dangerous as this situation? Maybe. Depending on your job, depending on your um, your status, depending on your family, depending on many, many things. Basically, if you're surrounded by a lot of people, the chances of this happening to you is very high because the chances of that happening is much higher because there's more people. But that's the thing. And Mon showed us that we cannot afford to just kind of whatever. There are certain things that we have to be cautious of. There are certain things that we need to be aware of. We do not ever want to be in a position where we can be played and pushed around. And the worst part is we don't even know about it. You see, Edmond at this point still does not know who is the one who is responsible for this. He still doesn't. But if I put most people in his position, they can probably come up with a few ideas of who is behind it. But Edmond couldn't because he's naive. So then the chapter ends. Now, then that leads us to a question: how? What can we do? The book kind of ends chapter 7 with a very bleak tone, which is that, oh, great, wonderful, all these assholes kind of get away with whatever they want. They plotted, they schemed, they ruined this man's life. Then what? Does it mean that we should do what they do? Of course not. But then what, right? If we know that we should not do what they do, what can we do to make sure that this does not happen to us, and especially why we shouldn't do what they do? This is where Edmond's transformation becomes very important. That's where it lies in chapter. Let me read the thing so I don't make a mistake again because it's embarrassing. This is where we will find in chapter. I can't count. Hang on. 14, 15, 16, and 17. Now, I know I skipped a lot of chapters in between because honestly, the chapters in between are not that important to a certain degree. I can fill it in for you guys. But if you want to read the story between Villefort and his father, read chapter 12. It actually infuriates you. I'm just gonna tell you first. If you read chapter 12 and you realize that what Villefort does makes more sense after you read chapter 12. So you don't really have to read all the chapters in between. I'll fill you guys in on what it is because honestly, it's not that important. What we want to know next is actually what goes on with Edmond, which is that how does he come out from this? How does he come out on top of this? Because there's still about 80 plus chapters, 90 plus chapters to go. So surely he comes out on top, right? But how? That's where we would explore this next week. So again, the important thing right now is chapter 14, 15, 16, and 17. If you want to, these four chapters is are what we are going to do next week. It's really going to take the whole 1 hour and a half, and I don't even think I can finish the whole thing, but we will see, and I will try. But as a bonus, if any one of you are interested to know exactly what's going on between Villefort and his father, which honestly I have to go through it anywhere later on, but just feel free to read it first. It is chapter 12, titled Father and Son. There is where you really, really kind of know what exactly is going on between Villefort and his dad. Have fun reading that one. I got very pissed off when I read that one, to be honest. So, in summary, what we learned today is people are always out there. There's somehow people out there who always want to get you. There are people out there who are unhappy about something. The people out there who always try to one up you in one way or another. Now, so then what do we do? That's the most important thing. Hence the reason why I'm doing it in the first place. So, that being said, that's pretty much done what I have for this week. Now I will take some questions. If any one of you guys have anything to gonna ask or say, you can either type it in the chat or just ask it right now.